want to.
And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. We got another great show planned for you today. My guest is Jerome Kitzke, who's released the following CD and album, the Paha Sapa Give Back. And we'll be talking about his album. He's an American composer. And this album represents his latest work. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's
Appreciate
great to be
having
here.
you on. And we're always fascinated on Let Them Talk with any programming that has to do with Native American traditions and history of this country, right? Long before it was called America. And so we're very appreciative of your coming on our show and telling us about your work and what it is that led you to do this kind of work in this programming. And we're going to be watching a video showing some of the work that you've done a little bit later on in the program. And I know you have this record, and we're talking to people about the record, about the CD, and what's on it, and where they can get it, and all that kind of thing as we go on. So welcome to the show, Jerome. Now, I'm reading from your American composer, storyteller. You have we've had Ethel on the show, by the way, and we talk here about your music was influenced by the spirit of the Plains Indian song, driving jazz, beat generation poetry, and contemporary classical music. Well, that's a lot there, right? And, right. Tell us a little bit about. Let's start with the beginning, the Native American influence. It seems, from my knowledge, that you seem to be drawing from the experiences of the Northern Plains Indians, what some people call the Sioux, the Lakota people. You talk about the Wounded Knee Massacre in the video, and those are things we've talked about on this show. How did that come to influence your work, and what's the message that you're trying to send with that, regarding that?
Well, I often get asked if I'm an Indian person, and I say I'm not. And I also get asked, well, why do you do these pieces that have the subject matter? And my answer is always, I do them precisely because I'm not Indian, and I think that I want non-Indian people to hear the pieces, to get some information from them that might prick their interest in going into looking a little further into the stories that I use in some of these pieces, and get a little bit deeper story than they got growing up in grade school and high school.
Right, that's very good. Now, I didn't want to get to that at the beginning because, to me, to speak of the history and the culture of a people is anyone's right. However, I know it is somewhat of an issue with the whole idea of non-Indians adopting Indian cultures and styles.
Well, yeah, it can be a big issue, and I've done many residencies where I've worked in Indian communities and had some rough moments, but those rough moments always ended up well. Right. Because once people I would be dealing with would recognize that my heart was in a good place, they would recognize I wasn't trying to be an Indian, but I was trying to draw more attention to the very things they want attention paid to. And the only way I felt I could do that would be by writing pieces of music about various things. And I never did these pieces willy-nilly without first asking for a permission to do them. And so it's been a great, the last 28 or so years I've been doing these kinds of things, and it's been really very wonderful for me to be sometimes in the Native community and to just immerse myself and then go out and do these pieces and then take them wherever they'll go.
Asking seems to be the key. Right there, it's the respect of touching base and showing people what you're going to do, and finding out maybe if a song that you want to use is a sacred song or others that are more popular.
Right. But I'll say this: all of these pieces, the music in them it's not really influenced by the Northern Plains music itself. My influence that comes out musically more comes from the people I've met, the stories I've been told, the things I've done when I've been in Indian country. However, one piece, the title track of the new record, the Paha Sapa Give Back, that definitely is influenced by the Northern Plains drum style.
Or the drumming style, and that's the Green Automobile, is that the one?
No, the Paha Sapa Give Back.
The Paha Sapa Give Back, right, okay. And that is, interesting, because the other influence you mentioned, and the Green Automobile is Allen Ginsberg poem, is the beat poetry, and Allen Ginsberg, of course, is is a a homeboy from the Lower East Side, and we know him well. And so interesting connection. Now, I actually am not too surprised that one would find a connection between Allen Ginsberg and Native American music. Although when you think of Allen Ginsberg and Indian, you think more of like yoga and India, the country of India, which is where Columbus thought he was when he named Native Americans Indians, right? So tell us about how you've been able to take the New York sound of beat poetry and mix that with the Northern Plains Native people.
Well, I don't really mix those two together. The Green Automobile, the piece on this record with the Allen Ginsberg text with the same name, that's a completely different piece from the Paha Sapa Give Back.
Okay, so it doesn't relate directly to the Native thing. It's its own thing.
It's the only similarity is that it comes from me. So it's then filtered through me. And I had Ginsberg, when he was alive, was a really wonderfully kind man, and he gave permissions to use his poems very easily. And there's a little story I can tell that one time I was trying to get permission to use a poem of his, and I was talking to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, go ahead." And then he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out this crumpled up piece of paper, and I thought, what the hell was that? So he gives it to me, and he says, "But if you start making any money, you got to call this number."
Okay, right.
So I undid it, and it was a handwritten phone number that it must have been a lawyer, I would imagine.
Right, if you start making
I still have that somewhere, and of course I never made much money from it, so it never became an issue. But he was really great about giving easygoing permissions to use his work. And I've done, I think, 6 works with his texts.
Oh, I see, right.
So the Green Automobile is one of them. So.
Okay, interesting. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to be a composer. What brought you to be a composer? How did it all start?
I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was born there in 1955, grew up right next to Lake Michigan, had a really nifty childhood, I think, and I was a sports-minded person. I was tall, I was very athletic, I played basketball. That's what I wanted to do.
Sports-minded in Wisconsin?
Yes.
I'm shocked. Shocking. And you didn't like cheese either, right? No.
But this was in the late 60s, early 70s, and I was running up against attitudes by the people that ran those types of activities that I really didn't agree with, so I just threw it all aside.
Well, that was that period. I mean, Wisconsin was at the center of the anti-war protests and things like that.
And I made my own little protests about various things, and then one day in an English class, I think it was the 10th grade, my English teacher, Mary Johnson, who's still alive, I'm still in touch with her, I'm still friends with her, she asked of some of us in class, we were reading John Steinbeck's book, The Pearl, and she said, "I'd like to analyze this book in a slightly different way. I'd like some of you to write musical themes based on some of the human themes in the book." She was going around to the class talking to various people for which that question made sense. She came to my desk and she said, "Jerome, I'd like you to do it as well." And I looked at her and I said, "What are you talking about? I don't write music." She knew I was in rock and roll bands, and she knew I played French horn very badly. But she must have seen something in me, and she said, "Give it a try." So I said, "Okay." And I was 15 years old, and I lo and behold discovered that I had some natural ability at it.
Was she a music teacher?
No, English.
English teacher.
We were studying literature.
Sorry, I was thinking, that's interesting. So you're studying literature, but she saw the musical connection from the point of view of
and what happened there, which has affected me to this day, if anyone studies my output, you'll see that many pieces have texts. So that first work I ever did came from a novel. It didn't have a text in the music, but its inspiration came from Steinbeck's words. Right. So thereafter, all of my pieces, they're some kind of story, or they use some kind of text, and it's just where I came from. And then, of course, I was a child of the 60s, and I was completely enraptured with the Beatles and the British invasion, and then the American response to that. And
what's your favorite music?
Whatever I'm liking, whenever I'm listening to it.
Changes at different times.
Changes.
Any genre that you like, born in any other genre, or do you listen to a lot of different genres?
I listen to a lot of different things.
Right.
And there's still many musics I've probably never even heard yet, so it's from around the world. But of course, February 9th, 1964, which we have the 50th anniversary earlier this year, was the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And I, like millions of young kids around the country. I was watching that.
Sure, I was too, I think.
And I thought, wow, that looks like a good job.
Right.
So, like millions of young men and women around the country, boys and girls around the country, rock and roll bands were being formed at that instant. So I was a part of that.
All right, Jerome Kitzke, the Paha Sapa Give Back. And this is pretty much available everywhere. You just type it in, you know how to do it. And we have an example of some of your work. We have a video we're going to play, a couple of minutes of it, not the entire video.
Not from this record.
Not from this record, but I think it's a good example of some of your work, and it's visual, of course, since we have a television. So maybe we can go to it and watch about 3 minutes of the following video.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and talk some more.
The way it was told to me.
This is the way it was told to me.
This is the way it was not told to me by any reference from teacher or textbook in 16 years of American schooling. That the volume cradled in the arms of the learned and scantily clad Lady of Destiny contained thousands of bitter stories that were never read to us. That the words repression, kidnapping, torture, rape, murder, terror, extermination, and genocide were never said to us. Never in connection with the beloved flag, to which we swore allegiance every morning in our sunny classrooms. The bison, of course, knew nothing of this.
And we nothing of them. The words starvation and famine were never mentioned in reference to an Indian country that once had seemed to be a single robe, entirely covered with buffalo. We never learned how the United States repeatedly manifested its destiny on thievery of Indian land in at least all 6 of the sacred directions. No one mentioned that of the 370 treaties made between the U.S. government and the sovereign Indian nations from 1776 until 1871, every single treaty was violated by U.S. citizens. Also omitted from our education was any
reference to the 19th century Holocaust of the animals, the story of the mass slaughter of enormous numbers of elk,
deer,
pronghorns,
bighorn sheep,
bear ants,
wild horses,
as well as bison,
and the collateral damage to
prairie dogs,
black-footed ferrets,
birds of prey,
wolves,
and coyotes,
for all our relations,
went entirely untold as well. The bison, of course,
knew
nothing
of
this. The time, 1880, early fall.
Okay, that's very interesting. So that's a little bit of a video that goes on for half an hour. It's available on Vimeo. It's sort of interesting. It's called Buffalo
Nation,
Nation.
Bison. It's a 25-minute excerpt of a 90-minute piece that I call a theatrical musical survey of the bison in North America.
And it was performed in Brooklyn.
This is Brooklyn Heights, First Presbyterian Church on the Music at First series.
Right, I've been there. And they have a lot of interesting events at that church,
great
right?
Place.
Great place, right? And what is the... So I listened to it actually before I came, and it's the story of the buffalo and how the settlers came and, almost under orders, the military just wiped out all the buffalo in order to destroy the Indian control of the land and to allow the settlers to come. And since we know in the sodbusters failed, and they wound up leaving anyway, and nobody really lives in that land, so it was not very good. It was buffalo country. It was not farmland.
Oh, exactly.
It was totally an error to even try and settle there.
the whole nature of that landscape changed when the bison were nearly made extinct, and the prairies were ripped up for farming. I mean, it changed the whole ecological aspect
and
of
they had
it.
the dust, by the 30s, we had the Dust Bowl because of it.
I got attracted to doing a piece about bison because of the numbers. When you hear of that there were, in let's say 66, there were still 30 to 80 million bison left on the northern and southern plains, but by 1888 there were less than 1,000 in Canada and the United States.
Wow.
Those numbers just startled me into and pricked my artistic, creative juices to flowing, and I was originally going to do just a piece about the decimation itself, but then I thought this whole story of the bison, because they've been around 75 million years, a lot longer than us, from that time period to current day, I thought there's a piece there. So I had to just find a way to put it into 90 minutes.
And our very own Bronx Zoo, I guess, plays a big role in that, because it was the bison that were used to regenerate the bison population, which is nowhere near what it was, but at least is
in part,
is a little bit stabilized now, maybe 10,000 or so. I don't know what it is now, but and there's some talk of trying to return them in large numbers.
Oh, they definitely. There's bison activity in all 50 states now.
Yeah.
Even Hawaii. I don't know quite how that works. I have to explore that. But
really?
There are large herds. There's about 450,000 total now.
450,000. So it's up from 1,000 to 450,000.
In over 100 years.
In over 100 years, but down from 20 million or more.
Well, by the late 1880s, like I said, in the United States, there were 400 perhaps left, and that could have been half day's work for the
one shooter, right?
But they were saved by a coalition of white ranchers and native people.
So it could have been worse, but it was really bad because it destroyed the culture of these people, right?
Well, the very worst thing would have been complete extinction, and then we'd really be
Why is the
suffering.
bison, I mean, this is not the main, but interesting subject, why is the bison important to the Lakota people, the people of the plains? I mean, just in 30 seconds, how would you describe it for folks who don't know?
Well, it would, for not just the Lakota, but for other nations in the southern and northern plains, it was their spiritual and physical commissary.
Their commissary, right? It was everything they wanted was there.
Yeah, it was not just, of course, for food, but also the bison itself was used for many different things. There's a part of the piece that there's a litany of all the uses, and there's just dozens and dozens of them that the native people made of the animal. But also then it was, there was the spiritual aspect and what it represented to them. So as you can imagine, that systematic killing of them was killing the spirit too of the native people.
It was tremendous psychological effect to see that. Right? It was almost psychological warfare against these people. What is the word? Your CD here, Paha Sapa, Give Back. What does Paha Sapa mean? What does that term mean?
Paha Sapa is Lakota for Black Hills, and the piece, the Paha Sapa Give Back, means just that. Give the Black Hills back to the Lakota and Arapaho Cheyenne people vis-a-vis treaties that were made and then broken.
Right, well, as a Midwesterner, you're fully aware of the Paha Sapa. Tell folks what the Paha Sapa are who don't know. What are the Black Hills? Where are they located? Why are they important?
They're a stunning geological outcropping in western South Dakota and eastern Wyoming, sort of foreshadowers of the Rocky Mountains, perhaps. But they're a very unique place. Some of the oldest rock and landscape on the earth reside there,
and they're particularly sacred to the people, the native people there.
Right.
Now, one of the arguments I've heard from people who think that the Lakota are just complaining is that, well, they were from Minnesota anyway. How is it all of a sudden sacred to this place near Wyoming when they're from another part of the country? How could it be sacred to them?
Well, there are people that complain about that.
I've heard that, and it's. I'm just curious what your feeling about that is, and what the feeling generally is.
Depends on what you believe. The Lakota people believe they came, ascended from the Wind Cave in the Black Hills a long, long time ago.
Right. So wherever they lived at the time,
nation.
When whites ran into them, this is where their roots were.
And they have evidence in their oral histories of being all over the United States and traveling. It's what people don't recognize. People didn't always the Indian nations just didn't stay in one place. Many of them did travel and have routes and trade routes. And
do you take any position or get involved in some of the movement to free Leonard Peltier and some of the other AIM people who are in prison? Have you been involved in any of that, or do you take a position?
Not actively, but I agree with the fact that he should be released.
He should be released, right? He should. President Obama, listen to us.
Pardon him.
It's time to pardon and free Leonard
He's
Peltier.
Not well. He's been very ill for a long time.
This is a good time to get the message out. And so folks should Google, if you don't know what we're talking about, Google Leonard Peltier. Read about it. There's lots of material up there. He has a website, and learn why this man should be freed. If you've believed in freeing Nelson Mandela, you should believe in freeing Leonard Peltier. All right, so that said, let's talk again about the music. Paha, Sapa, Give Back. I love what is this knife here? That's curious. The image here, is there a reason why that's there?
Yeah, all of the objects that are photographed and used in the record jacket and the liner notes are objects that are important to me, that I've used in my daily life for a long time. So that knife is one of the objects that's important to me.
Is important to you? It's not particularly sacred as far as the native people or anything like that. It's just something that's important to you. And the other objects are on top of the actual CD. Are those are
just feathers that have come to me all over my travels, all over the world.
All right, great. And basically, there's three cuts, three pieces. Three pieces. Yep. Right.
The Green Automobile,
right.
The Paha, Sapa, Give Back, and the final piece is Winter Count.
Right, that's one we haven't talked about. Winter. What's a winter count?
A winter count is in the northern plains. It's a depiction pictorially of an important event that would occur from one summer to another. The most important event from one summer to another would be depicted, often painted on the back of a bison robe by a person that was called a keeper of the winter count, and then they would be seen and kept and saved.
Sure.
And when the bison were eliminated to such a degree that there were not many buffalo robes left, they started to do the winter counts in ledger books.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that. Interesting. So, this is anti-war. It mentions in the linear notes this is an anti-war song.
Winter Count.
Winter Count is an anti-war song. Anti-war, like today, Iraq War, Iran War, Afghan War.
Yes, but also it's a general statement. It's the fourth anti-war work that I felt compelled to write since 1991. I wrote one during the first Gulf War, then in 2003 when that war was foisted upon us. And then in 2008, I wrote a piece for Sarah Cahill for part of her Sweeter Music project, which is composers writing solo piano works for her that were all anti-war. And that was for the ongoing war. And then Winter Count is because the war is still going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. And look what's happening now. There's considerations about troops going into Syria and back to Iraq.
And they're bombing again and everything.
It's just very spooky and scary.
Sure.
But
You do that through the composition or the lyrics, or is there...
Both. Both. In Winter Count, there's 7 poems ranging from Aeschylus to Harold Pinter. The very center of the piece, there's this magnificent poem by a Scottish poet, I believe, Helen Mackey, World War I poem.
Okay.
It's called Train, and in it she's describing, as if she were standing in a train station, she's just describing what she's seeing. And what she's seeing is, I'm not sure what the year would have been, but she's watching soldiers come and go back and to and from the front. And she's watching a young couple, for instance, have their goodbye, sad goodbyes, and then she's watching a young family where the father who has to go, and a nanny that's got 3 children. And it's just really a beautiful, heart-wrenching poem. So I try to capture music in and around these great texts that support the text, but also speak their own.
How do you find your collaborators, the folks that you work with, the folks we saw in the video and stuff? How do you find the people you want to work with to
Well, I've been in New York.
pieces?
I've been in New York 30 years now,
Sure.
so you just meet people and then you remember people, and in some cases, for theatrical pieces, we audition people. And for this excerpt of Buffalo Nation that we just saw part of, we auditioned the actors.
And you do this through grants, or is it is a record company supporting this? How do you go about financing this? Yeah.
I didn't know this was a comedy show.
Yeah. Now it is, I guess. That's interesting. So it's like everything else. Is beautiful art in New York. It's done as a thing from your heart.
Yeah. There's actually a serious answer. The money comes for these things sometimes through commissions. Buffalo Nation was a commission by Present Music, a group in Milwaukee. Sure. And then the performance I just did, that was mine. So, and
put it together. Cool.
Funded it the whole bit.
Is there going to be any live performance of this, or do you have anything else coming up that people can go see or something like that? Or
I think the next big event will be for my 60th birthday concerts, which are going to be in the spring next year. I used to do...
The new 50, you're looking good for 60. Congratulations.
Thank you. I used to do a concert every 2 or 3 months for many years, and then that got lesser and lesser, and now I try and do one big event a year.
Right. Okay, so that'll be in February. And we could look forward. We can even have you on to talk about it.
Sure. The birthday's in February, but we're going to avoid the winter months and probably have the concerts in sometime in May.
Right, so. Right. Very good. So we have the Paha Sapa Give Back. Right. Jerome Kitzke has joined us and has been talking about what has moved him and influenced him to do music that is themed, some of it themed with the Native American people's struggle for survival in America, which has been a long, dramatic struggle and a sad one at that, and also enlightening us with the fact that you brought together the New York sound of the beat poets, and it shows that there's to me a connection there between the Native American experience and what the beat poets are trying to do here in New York. It's all trying to transcend this sort of corporate world that we've been forced to live in, where 1984 is still coming. It hasn't arrived yet, or maybe it arrived a long way ago, but that's how I see the world. We're being told what to do by forces beyond our control.
And to also tell a sort of truth as I see and feel it to be.
Wounded Knee, for example. It was interesting that you mentioned Wounded Knee. And do you mention that in any of these? I know you mentioned it in some of the material I read about you, but
but I did do in 1990. I wrote a very large work to commemorate the centennial of the Wounded Knee massacre.
Well, anything you'd like to add in the last 20 seconds that people should know about your work?
The record's available.
Right.
Innova.mu. That's their website.
All right, great. There it is. And Paha Sapa Give Back, Jerome Kitzke. Just give it a search. The internet is great for finding these kind of things, and you shouldn't have any problems doing it and following Jerome's work here in New York. And next time he does a live performance, I'll be there. It looks very interesting. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Let 'Em Talk. Have a great holiday.